talking about China within the international system, there are a number of wrong assertions in Ranin and Jennifer's case. Because Ranin and Jennifer's case is in a world that sounds beautiful, but is unreal. Now, first wrong assumption. China is somehow culturally dependent on the West because it needs the West, and the West would never cooperate with China if it were not more liberal. Now, what we ask ourselves now is, A, who is not cooperating with China now? China goes to violate sovereignty laws among Japanese and US islands, and Obama says he's annoyed. But did he change anything? He did not. China does God knows what to the Tibetans. Did it change anything? It did not. Now, what Ranin comes up here and says that, no, rega. If China now suddenly will be nice to the gays, forget the monks, forget the Muslims, forget all of them. If suddenly will be nice to the gays, first of all the people that are not cooperating with China, which I still have to hear who is that, all these people will now start cooperating with China. But then, after, even on top of that, Ranin comes up here and says that China will be finally able to be not dependent on forces like Russia and on non-Western forces. Two wrong assumptions there. First of all, China is not dependent on anyone that is not also dependent on China itself. So there is an economic interdependence that obviously, as we see in the system today, weighs much more than the cultural preferences of the West. But second of all, why is since when is the importance of the world just on liberal values? We have BRICS nations. We have India is not the toppest democracy ever, the most liberal places. The most liberal places become more and more important in political systems, and China does not have to cater to the Swedish idea of legitimacy, something that not even the US adheres to completely in order to function in the international system. So we don't see how this will change the public relations of China within the world. We don't see how that is needed, and we don't see why that case is irrelevant. But we agree with Ranin and Jennifer is that legitimacy is key. Legitimacy is key among the Chinese people, because what we need in China, if we are China, this house is China, is to keep a stability and a legitimacy, because this is how we can actually bring forth in the long run, as we've seen with the Cultural Revolution, that was largely successful. We're moving away from that, and I'm going to bring you in my first and third point why the balance of power, why doing it slowly and respecting how people now in the largely rural areas of China balance the change that is already happening, namely on the economic basis, with traditional values, and how if we disturb that, we'll disturb the very delicate balance that now happens within the Chinese changing system. So therefore, my first point will be deepening Alon's point of the backlash, how this will lead to a short-term harm on the gay community and the Chinese government's power over its own people, but also on a long-term harm on both of them as well. Second of all, I will talk about the balance of power and how it is essential for the power of the Chinese government today to let some conservative values govern the social culture of China, because they need that to balance the economic things that are going on. And in between those points, I will have the independence of China and why it is important for China to show to its own people that they're independent of the West, and they're not letting the West dictate their culture and their values, and this will lead to more legitimacy. First of all, why this will lead to a bad backlash. Now, I already explained that in order to deal with the increasing change in the Chinese society, which is huge on an economic basis, because we're moving from communism to extreme capitalism, slowly and gradually, it's important for the rural society, which is mostly of China, because still also the people that live in the cities are people that come from the countryside, and then also at the end go back to the countryside, so they still carry those values. So the cities are not these liberal bastions that they're in the West. For those people, it is important. And this is why we see currently that the Chinese people go back to traditional values. It is important to have something to hold on to whilst everything else changes, because otherwise that change is too much. And this house that wants to move slowly, because it's a very big house, will move too fast and it might fall, and we do not want that. So what will this do? It will show that this balance of power, that this balance is skewed. That not only do they not even have the conservative values to hold on to while everything changes. But not only that, it will put a guilty group of people on the table. Because this is not really an issue among Chinese social culture in the sense that it's an issue in the US, for example. because we see that these people are not actively persecuted today. This is what Alon talks about when he talks about persecution. But what will happen is when the Chinese social culture, the Chinese society will feel itself threatened and this change will become too much, they will look for someone to blame, naturally. Now this, if the factor that makes instability break is gay marriage, then the guilty part of society will become the gays. So this will lead to more antagonism. Maybe they will be able to marry for a little bit, but will suffer much more discrimination from the society that we think they're dependent as well. So what we still have to hear from side of proposition is why it is better for a gay couple to be discriminated actively against by the society today, which persecuted, which they're not, as we've seen in the long info slide, than being able to marry. I'm going to take a second.
No Chinese value is against same-sex marriage. Not in Taoism, not in Maoism. Deal with that.
Thank you very much. Relationships traditionally are between a man and a woman because they're there to produce, like, that's how families work. To make children, and this is what was culturally, this is what was conservatively the culture. So if we need that to hold on to, it's not important that it's legitimate within some sort of Chinese religion or tradition. It's just that people see it as something from the past that they can hold to. It's only important about that. So this already goes into the balance of power and how it is important for the Chinese people to know that they have something to hold on to, and as soon as we eschew that balance, the guilty will become the gays can. So once we see that the Chinese government here has the power to impose laws from top down, it needs to be very, very careful, and this is what bottom up actually means. It needs to be very, very careful into not disturbing the people too much, and we think that this will do so. And it's even more important to show that China is independent in the cultural sense of the West, and this is my last point. China is independent in cultural sense of the West, as we see as they ridicule every time that the West doesn't function. They need to see themselves superior, as we see with the U.S. government shutdown a month ago, where Chinese media repeatedly ridiculed the West, so that the Chinese people could have pride to stand over the West. If we now show that we're the West bitches culturally and we do whatever they want, so to cooperate with people that we already cooperate with, this makes no sense. This harms the gays, it harms the government, this harms everyone. We beg you to oppose.